My brother-in-law sabotaged my interview and stole my dream job, then bragged about it at a family reunion. So, I leaked proof to his boss and got him fired. I'm a 29-year-old guy, married to an amazing woman. And up until recently, I had this whole let's keep the peace approach to dealing with my brother-in-law. He's 35 and acts like he's God's gift to the world. Let's call him BIL. You know the type. Always bragging about how much money he's making, how he's so successful, and how everyone else should take notes from his genius. Every family gathering with him felt like being trapped in an obnoxious TED Talk that no one asked for. But since he's my wife's brother, I figured tolerating him was just part of the deal. The guy's been insufferable for years. Whether it was hijacking conversations, showing off his expensive crap, or accidentally making backhanded comments about other people's accomplishments, he always managed to make things about himself. And I'll admit it, I let him get away with a lot. I didn't want to cause drama with my wife's family. I kept my head down, let his crap slide, and assumed it wasn't worth the fight. I regret that now. A few months ago, I applied for this job that I was genuinely excited about. It was at a tech company I've admired for years, and it was the kind of position I'd been working toward for ages. I'd poured everything into the process, perfecting my resume, nailing the interviews, and following up with everyone I could. I got really good feedback from the recruiter, so I felt like I had a real shot. It wasn't just another job. It was the job, the one that would set me up for the future. Then, just as I was waiting for the final confirmation, I got an email saying they'd gone with someone else. I was crushed, but I told myself these things happen. Companies have their reasons, right? I had no idea at the time how much worse it actually was. Last weekend, my wife and I went to her parents' place for a family reunion. It was the usual chaos, people everywhere, loud conversations, kids running around. And of course, BIL was there, holding court as always. At dinner, someone casually asked me how my job search was going. Before I could even open my mouth, BIL cut in with this smug grin on his face. "Oh, you mean that tech job," he said, his voice dripping with fake innocence. "Yeah, funny story, I got it." I blinked, trying to process what he just said. "What do you mean you got it?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. He leaned back in his chair like he was the king of the damn world. "I applied for it after you mentioned it at the barbecue a while back. Thought it sounded interesting. And, well, I guess they thought I was a better fit." My jaw literally dropped. "You applied for the same job?" "Yup," he said, popping the P like he was so proud of himself. "And, during my interview, I might have mentioned that you're not quite ready for a role like that. Just being honest. I was trying to help them make the right choice. It was like getting sucker punched in the gut. I couldn't believe the audacity. He didn't just go behind my back and apply for the job. I could maybe forgive that, but he actively sabotaged me during his interview. And he was sitting there, bragging about it like he'd just pulled off the greatest heist in history. "That's not being honest," I said, my voice ice cold. "That's screwing me over." He shrugged, all casual, like he hadn't just admitted to screwing me out of a life-changing opportunity. "Come on, man. It's not personal. It's just business. If you were the better candidate, you would have gotten it. No hard feelings, right?" I wanted to flip the damn table. I looked around at the rest of the family, expecting someone to say something, anything, but they all just sat there awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. My wife squeezed my hand under the table, clearly uncomfortable, but she didn't say a word either. I knew if I blew up then and there, it would just make me look bad, so I bit my tongue. But inside, I was raging. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, imagining all the things I should have said. By morning, I was done being the guy who let things slide. BIL had crossed a line, and there was no way in hell I was letting him get away with it. The next morning, I started putting pieces together. I remembered how, at that barbecue months ago, BIL had asked me all these oddly specific questions about the job. At the time, I thought he was just making small talk. Stuff like, what kind of responsibilities does the role have? Or do you know what their salary range is? It hadn't even occurred to me that he might be fishing for details so he could screw me over. But now, with everything that had happened, it was crystal clear. I started digging through old texts. Sure enough, I found one where he'd asked me for the job posting link, claiming he was just curious to see what kind of roles were out there. Like an idiot, I'd sent it to him without a second thought. I also remembered he'd asked me to review his resume a while back, something I'd brushed off at the time because I didn't want to help him with his self-aggrandizing nonsense. Now I realized he'd probably used that same resume to apply for my job. I reached out to a friend who works at the company. After a little prodding, he confirmed what I suspected. BAL had absolutely trashed me during his interview. He'd implied I was underqualified, lacked leadership skills, and wasn't ready for a position of that level. On top of that, my friend mentioned that BIL had massively exaggerated his own qualifications, claiming credit for projects he hadn't even worked on. It was like the guy had no shame. But the cherry on top? My friend had overheard BIL bragging about how he'd beaten out a family member for the job. Apparently, he thought it made him sound like a badass. I was done playing nice. I compiled everything I had, screenshots of texts, the job posting link I'd sent him, and even some of his social media posts where he'd been bragging about his win. I also wrote up everything my friend had told me about his lies and manipulations. Then, I sent an anonymous email to the company's HR department, laying it all out. I didn't pull any punches. I told them he'd sabotaged another candidate, me, and lied during his interview. I included every piece of evidence I had, making it impossible for them to ignore. A week went by, and I didn't hear anything. I started to think maybe they'd just sweep it under the rug. Then, out of the blue, my wife got a call from her mom. "Have you talked to your brother lately?" her mom asked, sounding stressed. "Something happened at his job, and he's really upset." I kept my face neutral while she was on the phone, but inside, I was grinning like a madman. Later that night, I found out what had happened. The company had launched an investigation and uncovered not only his lies, but also a few other shady things he'd done during the hiring process. They fired him immediately. No severance, no chance to save face, just straight up terminated. He was apparently blindsided, and I couldn't have been happier. But the fallout didn't stop there. Once the family found out what he'd done, his golden boy image took a serious hit. For years, he'd acted like he was better than everyone else, and most of the family had let it slide. But now, they were finally seeing him for what he really was, a manipulative, self-serving asshole. The real fireworks came when BIL confronted me a few days later. He showed up at my place unannounced, red-faced and fuming. My wife opened the door, and before she could say a word, he barged in, pointing a finger in my face. "You ruined my career," he shouted. "I know it was you." I stayed calm, leaning back on the couch like I had all the time in the world. "You mean the job you stole from me? The one where you lied to get hired?" "Yeah, sounds rough." He looked like he was about to explode. "Don't play dumb. I know you snitched to HR. You had no right to do that." "No right," I said, standing up. "You mean like you had no right to apply for a job I told you about, sabotage me during your interview, and then brag about it at dinner like it was some kind of game? That's not the same thing," he shot back. "It's exactly the same thing," I said, my voice low but firm. "Actually, it's worse. You didn't just screw me over. You lied to them, made up qualifications, and embarrassed yourself. You did this to yourself, not me." He started pacing, muttering about how I'd gone too far and how I'd ruined his reputation. My wife finally stepped in, her voice icy. "You ruined your reputation when you decided to screw over your own family. Don't you dare try to blame my husband for your mess." For once, BIL didn't have a snappy comeback. He just glared at me, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. I could tell he thought he'd have the upper hand, that he could guilt-trip me into feeling bad. But I didn't feel bad, not even a little. If anything, I felt like I'd finally stood up for myself after years of putting up with his nonsense. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread even further. BIL's wife, let's call her SIL, was furious when she found out what had happened. Apparently, she hadn't known the full story, and when she did, she wasn't happy. She'd been pushing him to be a better person for years, and this was the final straw. Rumor has it they're now separated, though I haven't asked for details. As for the rest of the family, most of them have distanced themselves from BIL. Even his parents, who used to defend him no matter what, couldn't justify his actions this time. He's still trying to spin the story to make himself look like the victim, but no one's buying it. Looking back, I'm glad I finally stood up to him. I spent years letting him walk all over me because I thought it was easier to keep the peace. But some people don't deserve your silence. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is call them out and let them face the consequences of their own actions. Bil thought he could get away with anything, because no one ever held him accountable. Now, he's learning the hard way that actions have consequences. I don't know what's next for him, and honestly, I don't care. All I know is that I've finally drawn a line, and I'm not letting anyone, family or not, cross it again.